Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, January 27th, 2026 will please come to order. The time is now a minute or two past 3 o'clock, and I would ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Good afternoon. It is 3:03 p.m. As a reminder to all in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Also, as a reminder to all meeting attendees seeking parking validation for today's meeting, please be sure to scan the QR code located on the back table near the chamber's entrance to claim your discount. If you do not already have a Metropolis account, you will need your license plate number to set up the account in advance of receiving your discount. Please be sure to complete this prior to the end of today's meeting, as the QR code will be removed at the conclusion of this meeting. Calling the roll, Ms. Turner.
Present.
Mr. Hauser. Mr. Hauser's absent at the moment. Ms. Simon.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. Sweeney.
Present.
Mr. Castleberry.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Schlepper.
Here.
Ms. Conwell is absent. Mr. Jones.
Here.
Council President Miller.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Has anybody signed in?
No public comment has been received.
Thank you very much. We will now go on to two legislative matters referred to the committee, starting with Resolution 2026-0015.
I want the record to reflect that Councilmember Hauser is in attendance. Resolution 2026-0015, authorizing an amendment to a contract with Gilbane Building Company dated April 23, 2024, for design build services for the county's Central Services Campus, to amend various terms and to add funds in the amount of $25 million for a total not to exceed amount of $58,353,000, effective upon signatures of all parties.
Welcome back.
Mr. Applebaum, is your microphone on?
Let me try that again. Good afternoon, Jeff Applebaum with Project Management Consultants. Over the more than a decade that I've come before you, this is the first time I'm actually going to say I have nothing new to say. We did present on January 13th. You have the presentation, and we're really here with our team to answer any questions that you might have as we go into this. The presentation is the presentation we made on the 13th, and we're simply continuing to work through all the processes, but there's nothing new to report at this point.
Okay, thank you very much. And at this point, I would open up the floor to anyone who has any further questions about this proposal to expand the interim contract with Gilbane to take us through our new bond sale date expected around June 4th of this year. Any further questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to refer Resolution 2026-0015 to the full council for second reading?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The resolution is recommended, and we will move on to Resolution 2026-0020.
Resolution 2026-0020, authorizing an amendment to a contract with Alliant Insurance Services, Inc. for insurance brokerage and risk management services for the period January 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2026, to amend the scope of said contract to include procurement of builders' risks and owners' protective professional indemnity service insurance, indemnity insurance related to construction at the County Central Services Campus, and to add funds in an amount of $3,964,000 for a total amount not to exceed $13,128,423, effective upon the signatures of all parties.
Once again, Jeff Applebaum. I don't see a Watif here, but I can answer. If there's any questions about this, I'm happy to answer those questions as well.
So, by way of a quick refresher, the county has a contract for about $9 million with an insurance broker, of which most of that contract is for various normal operating insurance coverages for various county liabilities, plus a small portion goes for the broker's services in finding the right companies and the right coverages. And so this legislation merely amends that contract to add $3,964,000 to provide the construction insurance necessary for the jail contract. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion to refer for second reading?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to refer Resolution 2026-0020 to the full council for second reading. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The resolution is so referred. It'll be up for second reading this evening and then up for final passage in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
We now go to item number 5, which is a presentation. Brandy Carney, Director of Public Safety and Justice Services, is going to give us an update on where we are with our opiate funds.
Good afternoon, Council President. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good afternoon.
I haven't been in front of the whole team in a while. Thank you. Brandy Carney, Director of Public Safety and Justice for the county. Nice to see all of you. I put together a presentation, or myself and Deputy Director Jill Smilek worked on this together to go over. There's been a lot of discussion on the opioid fund, what it is, what it isn't. So the past projects, current projects to date, as well as the financial information that covers the entire fund. So this is good. I know better. In a minute. There we go. So again, just an agenda, current projects, and then I go on to pending projects. And at the end of the presentation, the financial details and the fund balance that we have. So just some background. Some of you have heard this before. Some of you may not have, but just for some background. So we received our bellwether. So from the county's litigation that we did with Summit County, that bellwether settlement we received was approximately $124 million. That was at the very end of 2019, early 2020. I do have a chart here that shows our total opioid settlement revenue. So that would be, God bless you. So that bellwether settlement there includes the blue. The green, the red includes interest on investments. So soon thereafter, we took, because it was a large amount of money, some of it we kept internally, some of it we externally invested because it was a higher rate on the return. So we've been doing well, as you can see, receiving a return, some interest, and that's the red portion there. And then finally, and this is where I think there's been some confusion lately that I hope to clear up, the green portion. So beginning in October of 2024, there were federal litigation, opioid litigation settlement checks that start to come in. We don't usually get advance notice of when they're coming, but those were for places, for example, when they did a Walgreens at the federal level, those checks come in and are also deposited for the opioid fund, again, for federal settlement. Those on this slide include the green. Those have continued. For example, one of them came last week. They're all different amounts. Some of those checks do have reporting and usage requirements, some do not. And so it's a pot of opioid fund, but just that's not the fund that we initially had settled with, as an FYI. And again, there are some restrictions on those dollars. None of these are HHS levy dollars that had came up at one point. So for the purposes of this presentation, I say that because this is fluid, and as I said, a check came in last month, for example. I had worked on this presentation at the end of December, and the total revenue that had came in was about $137 million to date. One more piece that you guys might hear about is the statewide opioid litigation. When the state settled for everyone, the counties who are part of it, which does include us, even though we had already settled, their settlement, they received a large amount of settlement. There's dollars that are for Cuyahoga County, but they don't actually send them to us. They stay at what's called the foundation. There's a board at the foundation. We have another board locally that's One Ohio Funds. Those are coming over the next, they expect 15 years. We expect that could be for Cuyahoga County up to 15 million. But again, they don't physically come to us, and the foundation lets us know what we can spend. So for example, right now, if you go on the State of Ohio, One Ohio Foundation website, you can put in an application for Region 3, which is solely Cuyahoga County. It's for priorities for our opioid projects right now. They put out the RFP when the applications come in. We, meaning our board here locally, makes the decision, but the foundation maintains that funds and does the contract. So a little bit confusing. You might hear One Ohio dollars, but those are not part of what I'm including here, because we don't physically receive those dollars, even though they're afforded to us. And we make sure that they're not settlement dollars that for a business that we've already settled with separately. We make sure that they're, to make sure that, I'll just say. So now that I've confused everybody, so the next slide I think is really important. Just a quick reminder, we did set up for all the opioid dollars that come in here. Our Cuyahoga County, it's part of our code, section 725 as the fund was established. And most importantly, the funds in the opioid mitigation fund shall be used solely for the remediation, mitigation, and rectification of opioid epidemic in Cuyahoga County. So the mitigation fund and overdose statistics, I won't spend much on this. Dr. Gilson has been in front of you multiple times. You've seen the significant decrease, obviously, since 2021. And as Dr. Gilson said recently, the 2025 data indicates cocaine-related deaths surpassed opioid-related deaths. What I would just say is in the community now, there's so much mixing of drugs. So there's just, it's definitely a change going in a different way. And it's a challenge in ways of, you know, opioid, for example, opioid withdrawal, terrible, but there's a way that we treat it that we know. You know, you can get someone to go into treatment and recovery, and then there's a set amount of time. Whereas some of these other, you know, cocaine, when someone has an cocaine addiction, it's a little bit different. So it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all for everybody on the treatment end. Some of the next slides we have here, these opioid dollars have really done a lot of amazing things for Cuyahoga County. So I thank all of you so much for so many different projects that have been done. First, I'll mention that we had put out an RFP some time ago and invested about $12 million to 8 of our local addiction providers. There's 7 of them listed there. One of them, Stella Maris, is not there because they're still spending the difference on their balance. But these were projects all over, God bless you. Y Haven, for example, redid their rooms within their structure over on 55th and Woodland. Amazing units for people that prior I had seen their units, and they were just, it was so nice to get them something that they deserve. You know, new carpet, just throughout all the units there. They had new heating and things for the building that really helped out, or I think maybe a generator. I don't recall at this second. Others got new bedding for some of them had old bedding that they were able to provide. So things that really help people and everybody deserves and should have regardless of their situation. Someone like, for example, Stella, we were able to provide the funding for, it shows here, they now have an area where they host meetings for the entire county, and it's got audio visual and such. It's the top of the little pictures that they have there. They were able to purchase the rectory building and do some some residential care for medication-assisted treatment, which isn't something that they had done before. They were able to purchase another building. They were able to expand their services, provide 30 more beds a summer before last. So a lot of really significant services and expansion have happened and continues because of these dollars that this committee approved. Next slide. Ooh, I can't see. The current projects, accomplishments and next steps, that's about 27 million total. Many of these projects are far along or have been to date and just have some financials at the end being completed. I have talked about these before, so I won't in depth, but the START unit, funding staff, this was some time ago. This was a few years ago that was provided. Peer supporters and treatment for the Adams Board. The medical examiner was able to buy some equipment that was needed in their lab and some other items. The county prosecutor was able to receive some staff for crime analysis and help out with tracking where opioids at the time were coming. The Cleveland Heights facility for Metro Heights, again, this was some time ago, $5 million was given to them to help build out that facility. The next step, or the next slide, diversion center. I just want to take a minute. You know, the diversion center has received a lot of, I wouldn't say negative, but not positive feedback at times. But in the community, I have always received very positive feedback. I continue to. You go to a diversion board meeting, there's community members there. You go over to the diversion center. The people that are there, very appreciative, have very good things to say about it, and continuously have. It's not to say they don't say things aren't wrong, but it's been a really successful project in that way. We've invested $32 million total, and that's with all the contracts and everything to date. We have the CIT training, which is the crisis intervention training for police officers. Adams completes that training. That's been very successful. Over 1,600 officers or public safety have received that training. Excuse me just one second, I'm sorry. Council President, can I get a drink of water really quick? Thank you so much. Sorry about that, guys. Excuse me. Thank you.
It's coming.
Thank you very much. So I'll keep moving here. We do receive, as you can see, I think I got a little bit off on site. Thank you so much. I'm so appreciative.
So on the diversion center,
Yes, sir.
how much of the 32.5 million was spent on the operating side and how much was spent on the capital side?
The capital side for diversion is very small. I would say $1 million of it, and I can get you the exact number, but it was approximately $1 million.
So
I can send that to
by
you.
far the lion's share is for services and programs.
Correct, and that would be for not just the Oriana House running the day-to-day, but also Adams Board and Frontline Services who do the 24/7 hotline, Council President.
Okay.
So as you can see, the number of calls we've had in, everyone has to call to go to diversion for quick screening. Nearly 7,700 calls, admissions that we've had since 2021, 5,600 individuals. The next slide I put in here, and is important again, 32.5 million. These are the case Western Reserve is doing currently an evaluation, a deep, comprehensive evaluation of the diversion center. They've spent a lot of time with community members, operators, the board at the diversion center, and they're currently, they've finished their final draft. They're just sending it out. It's not yet public, but should be very soon, sometime this week. And they had some really great, some not so great, but really great things to say. Overall, the evaluations indicate it's operating high utilization, community-facing crisis center, a meaningful alternative to emergency department-based care or repeated crisis cycling of individuals. A good point, I think, just for knowledge for everyone, clients are predominantly male, over 70%, ages 35 to 55, disproportionately Black American, African American, over 50%, and over, or 50 to 60% were unhoused, and 60 to 65% unemployed. So CDCC is being used as a crisis option here in Cuyahoga County. Many clients are repeat clients, in fact, and that skewed some of the data we have. But again, very often, and this speaks to even some of the comments that we heard directly when Case was doing the evaluation. A client might come in, and I've said this before, and they only stay briefly, but then they come back and they stay a little bit longer. And there's a seed planted, maybe not that time, maybe the next time, but something to ultimately help those individuals get towards the end and get to a place of recovery. So just really doing a great service for our community. I'm not going to read some of the quotes there, but those are taken directly from Case's work. The next slide, I think I'll keep moving. The next slide is, again, Case also recognized some of the gaps, or where they feel that there were some resources maybe to focus more on. One is something I think we all know is the lack of, immediately when people leave the diversion center, the care, the housing, those resources that we all know we're all working on, but they're challenging, and it's hard to have them set, especially because the diversion center stay is so short. Another item they acknowledged is how short that stay actually is. Again, longer term stays, longer term housing, those are big needs that we all have. And finally, one of the police major, and has always been a continued site, is that it's a voluntary nature of the program, so individuals can walk in and walk out. And one of the things I would mention about the crisis center is, I know that there's been some challenges recently with the crisis center, but we've really listened to the community, to officers, to people on what the need has been. Diversion, we've made changes, but you can only, there was an initial operation, we made a lot of changes, but we can't keep changing those. But what we did is we've listened. We've heard the police say that, so now the crisis center does have voluntary and involuntary access for police officers, or for anybody for that matter. That was huge. That's something that we've heard regularly from the police. The length of stay, it was 5 to 7 days for diversion. We're hearing, this is a longer length of stay. If you get sent up to the second floor for the crisis center, that's a longer length of stay. So these are things that we've heard and tried to make sure, and that will continue for the programming there, to make sure that we're doing. I think we're doing a lot of great at at diversion, but the crisis center will be those services and more services. Just a couple more slides. The jail slides I have coming up. I'm so happy the last few days the media has had some positive articles regarding the jail. As you guys know, these opioid dollars started in 2021 was the first contract. At that time, there was very limited addiction programming in the jail. As we all know, there were some really challenging years there. These dollars, I just went in front of you guys for the third contract. These dollars, these $5.6 million to date, this withdrawal pod, we have 84 as the medium number of men in the pod, and there's also a woman area now. That withdrawal pod, we have 11 staff members with this funding. We've had them from the beginning, all three contracts, that are counselors that provide peer navigation, so services so that to help people like reentry or when they do leave the jail, so that there's services for them. So just significant programming that's really making a difference for individuals. We also do with these dollars some needle exchange and work with Metro and some others with Metro for some community programming that we had. The next slide just has, I have some data for the jail programming. The biggest part about this is, that I wanted to mention is 244 is the median average number of patients that we have in the jail on medication-assisted treatment. So that shows to the use of this program. It's about 16.3% when the population's around 1,500. In November of 2025, the median was 172 inmates that were medically detoxed. One of the things, and I included it in this yellow box below, for those of you who have been here for some time, before starting this, and 129 transports for the sheriff's office were made in November of last year for detox and withdraw. That's only 4% of the transports. For you guys that remember before these contracts were in place, it was up 74%, I think, at one time, because there was so much of that withdrawal services that were going out that were needed. And now those are services that we're able to provide in the jail with these dollars. So really significant impact. The average time to see an addiction provider, 3 days, but the withdrawal treatment starts immediately. Again, I won't go through these, but just speak to the work that this is doing. Really great. And the staff there has been phenomenal. There's been barely any turnover since the very first contract in 2021. So speaks to a lot to those 11, and also Megan, who's running the program. The next slide I have, I'll get through these quickly. It's a community-based project that we have with Addiction Dollars. Started this probably about a year and a half ago. These dollars are it's twofold. It's a media campaign about addiction. You know, what we've decided is not ready to quit for individuals. That's the message. We have a message within that, excuse me. Not ready to quit, so people are using safely. If you're gonna use with someone else, because a lot of people, they overdose, they're alone, there's nobody there to help them out. So this neighborhood-based project is twofold. It's one, the media campaign, which are also ads, encouraging this use of the drughelp.care website. We started off the last year and put that out there. The communications campaign received over 10,000 total page views, increased engaged users by 60%, had it on billboards, had it within some games on Netflix, so this message from us. The second part of the campaign, though, is really looking at neighborhoods specifically. So neighborhoods that have low resources but high overdose rates, looking at them and finding a community provider who really knows that community and can respond and say, okay, I know how I can help this community sustaining as we move forward. So, for example, they might say, this community, rather than having these Narcan boxes in CVS where people don't want to go, let's put them on the corner store where everyone hangs out. Or this community might say, I want to host a Friday night basketball game for youth in the community because of, otherwise, depending on the community, let them decide. And so, or if it's someone like a general neighborhood provider, they can decide because they know the neighborhoods throughout the county where it might be best suited. So funds for that project, again, we started last year. You guys recently approved a 1.5 budget for, that's just the budget, but I would still go in front of this council for contracts moving forward with those dollars. And that's throughout the next year. Again, the co-responder project, many of you guys are familiar with. It provides a social worker to respond along with a law enforcement individual to a scene. The law enforcement individual always goes in first and makes sure the scene is secure and secures it. But then you have someone, when you have a mental health emergency, or an addiction emergency, there's someone there who has been trained, can speak directly to the provider, really to help that the communication between them. And what we found is in time, as the relationship and trust grows between the law enforcement officer and the social worker, they become, when they start to see a situation, they're much more easier, the law enforcement, to let the social worker handle that because they can see where, this is the best way to handle this situation. Let them talk to that individual. They maybe have been there before or know how to communicate better with them. And the individual often feels, maybe more comfortable talking to someone that's not in a uniform with them. So this has been very successful, lots throughout the U.S. Many of you know that Shaker Heights program has been very successful and expanded. So we received, we were approved for a budget of 3.5 from all of you last quarter. So I'll be sending out an application, and the executive twice a year will make awards beginning in June, but it allows for communities to either start a program with multiple communities or just their community. We want communities to decide what's best for them, the type of response, if this is what's best for them, or to, if additional communities want to build on to the Shaker program, for example, to help them with some funding. So those contracts will go in front of you also this year. I think for the most part, these are some great stats. I won't go through them, but on the Shaker Heights model and how successful it has been for them, and as it's continued, really great for the county. Pending projects, next step, the Crisis Center. You are aware, we've went in front of you a few times. There was $7 million approved for the capital expenses. That's work that's currently being done. The Crisis Center does have an opening date of this September 26. As many of you know, much of that was based on funding from the state that required that date or requires that date. As I said earlier, it builds on the success of the diversion program. The intention is once the Crisis Center would be up and operational, have all the same programs as diversion, plus additional services, is 24/7, 365, all of those, that the diversion center, after a short amount of time, to close the diversion center, because what we don't want is two centers doing the same thing right next to each other, and we want, easy communication, explanation to officers, et cetera. They're very close to one another. I see, I can get through some of these. The Crisis Center, there's some slides here on the costs that we went through. For the sake of brevity here, I'll move to some of the final slides before the fiscal slides. So we do have some crisis mapping. Again, I want to reiterate that the Crisis Center is part of an entire continuum and really provides that, the walk-in clinic that we heard for at the diversion center, that people didn't want to always have to call first. They can walk in. We listened to these things and built upon it, and it's also been very successful at national and state levels for many, many people. I won't go into detail on those, but you have them. Let me go back one. The Opioid Innovation Fund, we provided $5 million and set up a board. That board is finally moving, I guess, to the next step. We've done a lot of work, made sure to get the right people on the board, and soon we'll be looking to accept projects that we will evaluate for innovative ways for addiction support, eradication, could be anything. So we're looking forward to it, and we expect to release that to anyone, not just a small local area, to anyone. So happy to discuss that further with anybody. So some of the slides that are probably most interested, but again, many of these or all of them build off of what we had just heard today. The financial details, again, these dollars, just to reiterate, the section of our code, when we accept the dollars, the funds in the mitigation fund should be used solely for remediation, mitigation, and rectification. We have as I mentioned before, this was in the table, approximately $124 million settlement we received. Since then, litigation proceeds, again, those are federal litigation. We're continuing to receive about $4 million. It's actually more than that at this point. And interest on investment, that was only as of August 15th of last year. That's continued also. So we're at about $137 million. These are all the projects that I mentioned. These are completed projects, completed projects, about $38 million to date, completely closed out. I think just some of the recent confusion there's so many projects that are going on. Some are closed out, some are still showing money, but not totally closed out. Some have not had contracts, but have a budget. So there's all kinds of different phases of these projects, and I think that's why I've received questions on so many different amounts recently, which is fine. I have no problem answering them. The contracts, open projects that we're working on, as I mentioned before, I went through all of these currently in place. It's about $52 million that we have. And we've talked about all of those. Open projects, contracts forthcoming. These are projects, for example, the first one, for example, and the 3.5 million. So those two, you got, the county council approved the budget last year. We moved the money over for the budget of those. They're still showing because I still need to go in front of you with the contract. So any of the communities that want to have a contract for a co-responder team, I go in front of you for the contract for those services. But I think that that's why, that's some confusion. Then we also have in here the additional, which has not went to county council yet, $12 million, for example, for the operations for the crisis center. We've went in front of you, you've awarded $7 million for the capital for that project, but not yet the operational dollars. And the diversion center, I do have diversion center funding on there in the event that, just precautionary, there's another year of diversion funding on there. In the event we need to keep it open another year, in the event that something else happens, I want to make sure that there's a backup for those services, just so we don't lose those services for individuals. So that money is there. Future projects, and I apologize, the last slide was capital for the crisis center. These are projects that we, administration, local, have talked about, have worked on, but have not went to council at this time. Those three projects there have not went to council in front of you at this time. But we do expect within the next year, actually months, to most of them to go in front of you. And finally, so as all of those, the three spreadsheets that I just showed in front of you, total revenue is 137 million is revenue. When you subtract that from the total of the projects above, it's only around $2 million. Again, some of the projects have not went to council yet, which I think is where some of the confusion has been. We've started planning on them, but they have not been approved by this council yet. And I just want to make a note, because often what I've heard is individuals are asking about what the balance is and then saying, oh, that's the balance free. But something like the jail program, which is really a phenomenal program in our jail, we just did the third iteration. So the contract was approved by this body in October of last year, but there's not additional sustainment dollars after that contract. So just as an example, if that contract runs out and we don't put some sustainment dollars or have other funding, then we wouldn't have, funding to continue that project. So just something to keep in mind when we see the balance on some of the opioid fund, if that makes sense. So I know that was a lot to go through, and I'm happy to take any questions or. That's a good question. I don't know.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. That was a lot, which is what we hoped for, so thank you very much. And Councilman Gallagher is first.
Randy, good to see you.
Hi, nice to see you.
All right. During budget, I heard that we don't do one-time usage of opioid funds. That's not true, is it?
We don't do one-time usage of opioid funds, Councilman? No. I would say that might have came at one point when we gave staff money for staff for a lot of projects. We had told them at that time, this is when we first received our settlement dollars, we're going to give you this one-time staff support, but after that, you have to find additional. But other than that, I can't think of one time that's been said.
Okay. I also recall not using opioid dollars for staff.
Again, that came out of, we did use it. The prosecutor's office got staff, the Fusion Center got staff, the HHS got staff. That first time, the first contracts, but then after that, they were asked to identify other funding sources, so they did not continue. Now, the jail contract with Metro is obviously different and does have staff, as does the diversion center.
But still.
Yeah.
Good usage. What's this 12 million for the crisis center? Over 3 years for $12 million for operational expenses.
Sure, Councilman, that is money. The Crisis Center project, when we worked on it and put it together, it included $7 million for capital, $12 million for 3 years of operating. That particular, the $12 million has not went in front of this council yet for approval, but it's for 3 years of operating that center, after which we told them, there's 3 years of operating, and then that's it for the opioid fund.
And then after 3 years, there's nothing, right?
That's correct, Councilman.
And not that it was, I think what we did on the diversion center, did it fulfill its mission, its purpose, original purpose?
Its original purpose, I would say, no, it didn't for a number of reasons, but I think the times changed so significantly at that time with COVID hitting right then, and we've adapted and quickly adapted, but your point's well taken on that.
Okay. Well, I mean, you adjust on the fly, that I understand, but to ignore the fact that it didn't serve the purpose for a total of $32 million is really tragic. I understand it's basically become a walk-in center, really, for a neighborhood.
Councilman, I would absolutely say, I think there's 6,000 individuals that have received care. It's not a walk-in. We still have the same process. I think even in the case report, you'll see that they've said officers, once they use the center, they continue to use it. They're very happy with how it's used. But you'll also see in the case report that we had initially planned for it to be, as you guys know, you know better than anybody, for our jail had so many individuals with addiction needs at that time. We opened up the center so that rather than taking them to jail, law enforcement could take them up to the diversion center. At that same time, the diversion center opened, COVID hit. City of Cleveland, for example, were not bringing individuals to our jail. They were citing them then on the street, hundreds. They'd give them a citation. So the make of the county, the community really changed at that time. But you also see from case that they see that individuals are still going and using the center. There's other community providers and hospitals still calling and getting them there. They're just not going through that initial intention the way that we had.
Well, I saw
planned.
6 million over 2 years for walk-in. That's a lot of walk-in.
So that project, for clarification, those projects have not went, that's a different project, an extension. These projects have not went. We've started planning, but they've not went in front of this council.
Do we
That's
have
why I
any
have them.
plans when the money runs out to move forward?
Councilman, again, depending on the project, there's lots of different projects. Some grants we've reached out to, depending on the project. For example, Metro is one that I've been really trying to watch what the settlement is in hopes that we can at least make sure to plan for a next contract with them. But there's a lot of projects. This is one-time money, as we all know. That was from the beginning.
That's what I thought, but then I was told it wasn't, but then it became true that it is, and I'm just very confused about that. But I will unconfuse myself, and thank you for all your work. You're wonderful. I really do appreciate working with you, and hopefully we can get this thing together, and hopefully with the new jail, things will be a lot easier depending on what we do with diversion. Last question.
Sure.
On the crisis center, we were originally told they didn't have enough money for the third floor, but you have third floor planning in here. Where'd that come from?
So I have third floor planning because from the very beginning, that was always part of the plan, that they would have outpatient services. Their current administration on the near west side would be relocated to the third floor to provide those services. I think some of the gaps in funding more recently, that was the last piece of it. So I have it in here because we planned for it, but I don't think that has not been met yet. So maybe I should take it out for clarity.
I didn't mishear that. So
No.
we don't have the money for the third floor yet.
The site is being built, but the services, I can get you that answer. I'm not sure at this point in time, sir, but I can get you that answer, Councilman.
Thank you.
Yeah. And if I could please provide, Councilman, one clarification. If I said one-time money, I always say that in terms of, when we receive the settlement, so people know the entire 124, it's one-time money. So that's usually,
It seems to be a term of art sometimes. Thank you.
thank you, sir.
Councilman,
I think Councilman Sweeney wants to.
You don't mind?
Councilman Sweeney, okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. Hi, Brandy.
Hi, Councilman, how are you?
You having fun?
It's amazingly fun.
Amazing. Through the chair to my colleagues and Brandy, when did this start?
So we received this settlement at the very end of 2019, early 2020. Our first contract started
That's
March
good.
of 2020.
Yeah. And that's 19 under the previous administration?
A little
Yes.
over than that. Yeah, that's correct.
And I'm just trying to figure out,
Sure.
124 come, they say, here, Brandy, figure it out, and, or was, excuse me, director, figure it out. How did that materialize from that, in its inception? I just want to understand.
Sure.
this from the-
So lots of planning and programming now. The very first inception was at the time, and this is a different administration, the council president at the time and the executive had identified projects for the first, I think it was offhand 24 million, if I remember correctly. And those projects were funded with those dollars. So they were needs. I think they had assessed needs over the last year and a half for the community, for the county. And that's how the inception, that's how those projects were afforded.
Thank you, through the chair. So there wasn't a $124 million. We're going to come up with a global plan, and this is how we're going to execute it. It's always been piecemeal.
No, Councilman, by no means. So we have multiple different planning committees throughout this county for opioid planning, for addiction planning, many.
No, but
I would say at that time, we had written a plan together for these opioid dollars for the first round to see how they go, to evaluate some of the evaluation that we've done throughout this whole process. There was a plan that they identified projects based on need at that time. So I would never say that there was no plan in place.
I didn't say there was
Yeah.
no global plan. There's plans all over the place. I'm just thinking, here we have $124 million. Let's come up with a global strategy to handle the opioid tragedy that's going on. Or it could be, let's just take a little bit here and go this and this and this and that. I was just trying to understand how it started, two different ways. Through the chair, when this administration came in, was it a continuation, or they said, wow, let's rethink it and put our own stamp on this? How did that happen?
To the councilman, I would say this administration didn't come in and make significant changes, I would say. A nexus to diversion or diversion services were something that for a long time was promoted and makes a lot of sense. There's so many different ways. There's initially we wanted to make sure that funding touched all the different areas. So harm reduction, so mitigation, response, recovery, and then we even did an innovation. So we made sure with those initial projects that all those different areas of addiction that we were touching and funding the needs at that time. Diversion was the largest priority at that time, and so that's where some of the funding that was provided for different service providers that need something, a nexus for diversion, those in-house providers that we were able to support. Then throughout what's happened is we've really seen in the community this need, and I think Adams is going through it now, where there's lots of different providers all providing great services, but particularly with funding at all levels, the need to kind of look at things and see where we can be, we wanted to have something that's comprehensive, that all the services that we had plus more are provided for this community, so something that would last a very long time in this community. That's something that we've talked about. When I mentioned the different groups we have a One Ohio group that has opioid priorities. Those are the same priorities in Cuyahoga County that we all have. So it's not like it's fleeting depending on who you'd talk to, I would say, for the priority needs.
Thank you. I'm just trying to get, what I understand is there wasn't a specific, we're going to tackle this portion of the opioid problem. We kind of spread it thin and going to try to do the best with as many partners as possible to deal with this situation. I'll just, through the chair, when Jack was here and he did the opioid, where's that in here? Remember the 10 million to come up with a think tank to try to,
Jack, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Councilman Sharon.
Oh, so sure, to the councilman. So that's part of the $5 million that was given to the Opioid Innovation Fund. As I said before, we wanted to give money.
Is that still active?
It was never sent over. We received $5 million. He went back in front of this body and advocated for more funding, and that was not received. So just the initial $5 million is with that fund.
Expended.
It's not, it's not on the sheet because it's the Cleveland Foundation is holding that money. When I mentioned earlier, the board, there's a board that's set up to take projects for new. That's what that $5 million will be used for.
Thank you. Through the chair, so we gave it to the Cleveland Foundation, we have no control over it anymore. And they're going to go through their charges to use it for opioid funds with a separate committee to do it.
We have 9 members of the board that this body, by resolution, identified who, the positions, that they would fill. For example, I'm one, our
Fine,
Paul Herdig, there's some medical providers, there's people with past experience. So this committee identified who would be on that board, and it's with the Cleveland Foundation, but we make the determination based on members of the board
Thank
for
you.
funding. Mhm.
And when you mentioned the dollars that come in after,
Sure.
let me start with, when the opioid fund was announced, was it dictated that it had to go to an opioid fund, or they were just free and clear dollars that was chosen to be put in an opioid fund?
To the councilman, I can't answer that question. It was our $124 million settlement, and this body accepted that money, and as they accepted it, the code is when that was developed and put into that fund. It never went into another fund, to my understanding, and then got moved over or anything of that nature.
The very specific question, though, is the dollars came in, were there any restrictions when they came in first? We accepted it, you presented it, we accepted it, and then we created a fund. But prior to the fund being created, were those dollars had any restrictions on it?
There were some identifications in the settlement, like our settlement, as far as, for example, we had to give money to centering. We gave $2 million to Case Western Centering as part of it. But for the bulk of those funds, no, those were opioid settlement dollars from litigation that we put in there. So to answer your question, not to my knowledge.
There was
Yeah.
no restrictions.
No, it was done for the litigating all of the deaths and the awful epidemic, so I think that's why they put it in.
I'm
Yeah.
just asking a
Yeah.
very specific
Not to my
question.
knowledge.
And through the chair, and the new money that's coming in, are they, have no restrictions as well? Because it was an opioid settlement, now we have different opioid settlements. Do they have, could they go to the general fund, or can they go
So
to
the
opioid?
new settlement dollars, again, they're for federal opioid litigation. So for what's happened with opioids, they come in. Some of the dollars, there's multiple checks, as I said before. Some of them say they have restrictions. You can only use it for this. You have to report on this. Some of them don't. So we take them, we put them in our opioid fund, and then we keep track, but it depends on the dollar amounts and where they came from, to answer your question.
And thank you. I'm just trying to drive a
Sure.
point home to my colleagues and my council president. These dollars could be part of the general fund, and we're having some tough times in general fund and an opioid crisis. I just want to be able to think about where we want to put these dollars as an option. And the opioid fund is something that going to go away eventually, right? And I hope the problem goes away. But we're going to put a big dent in this thing, and we have been. But right now, I wanted to ask the questions about what options that we have in regards to the opioid fund dollars before we put them in. We could put them someplace else, and I think I got my question answered.
Some of them have restrictions, and some do not have restrictions on how we use them, even though they were part of the settlement agreement.
Got it. Now, this is an overview. There's some really gritty details that could be gone through, so we have a full understanding. And I imagine, I don't have all those details, I probably don't need it, but I know our staff probably has every detail. But I just want to be very clear that we appreciate the efforts, but the council's going to be part of the discussions on future, my hope is the council's going to be part of the discussion on the future unencumbered dollars.
I absolutely, I'm open, myself, my staff, at our meetings, any participation you'd like, that's no problem. Again, these dollars are going fast, and there's a lot of people that are receiving a lot of good help, and we hope that continues. So, to your point earlier, I'll just say the federal litigation dollars have been a nice help in what was watching to be very close to not much money left. But even those are only gonna, how many more, we don't know, but, it's limited.
And the
But happy to have.
We have $22 million free and clear on projects planned but not approved by council.
There are projects that are planned but not approved by council.
Those are the planned projects.
Yes, we've talked about them with community, that's correct, that's correct.
And
And
then-
some of that is, for example, the jail project.
Yeah. And my last question is, you mentioned that they're approved, but we just have to get the contracts, contract year one's done, we have contract year two that's not approved by council.
This council approved the money at the end of last quarter for those projects, the budget, I guess I would say, so that's correct.
So the budget, but with they're broken down into years, I guess? And then-
It depends on, like, for example, Parma will be a contract that comes in front of you soon. So it'll be a contract with Parma for those dollars for 1 or 2 years.
But those dollars are already committed.
That's correct.
We're just going through it.
That's correct.
So basically, the bottom line is 22 million plus whatever money's coming in. That's available.
Depending on,
Okay, thank you, Director and Mr.
thank you.
President, thank you for the flexibility.
Ms. Simon?
Thank you. Just so the new people know, when this opioid settlement opportunity came with litigation, this administration at the time and council were extremely aggressive in hurrying up to get a lawsuit filed before the state came in to restrict our ability to receive the money directly. So we were very aggressive, and I'm really happy that we did that and jumped ahead of everything and got this huge settlement.
It was so significant, your work at that time, huge.
It was huge. It was a big deal. We had a
Huge.
clam, and then we got the money, and it was like, let's do, a lot of it went to Metro, but I understand my colleague's point, because I want to ask more about these, the open projects, contracts forthcoming. That's budgeted, but not necessarily committed.
That's correct.
So it's more than 22 million that,
I would say, for example, all the communities will have a document, we have it to post on our website now, saying we have these funds to support your co-response teams. So the budget, you guys approved the budget fourth quarter, so we have the budget for them. But as those individual contracts, I still need to go in front of you with those individual
okay.
contracts. Yeah,
So council can decide, no, we don't want to do that, correct?
you could.
Yeah, we could.
You could, yeah.
We could.
Absolutely.
And we also have the ability to determine what happens to the planned projects that have never come before us, to decide where we think that should go,
We could go in front of you with those projects and you could deny them, absolutely.
and find what we might think is a better way to spend the money. Because the planned projects you list here, there's countywide walk-in opiate assistance. Is that what the planned projects are?
So that's one project, the crisis center. Really, the intention is to have a location in Cuyahoga County that has every service imaginable for those with addiction and mental health needs. This adds on the current crisis center concept and has all walk-in services for individual with
Brent,
addiction.
just slow down.
Yeah.
I know you have a lot of information. I don't have it in my head. So the countywide walk-in assistance, 1 year, 8 million, is that for the crisis center?
No, it would be on site, so it would be a building with a crisis center, but
Where?
close to this crisis center, but it wouldn't likely be operated by the same.
So we're building another building?
That project has not went in front of you yet. We have talked about that project when we talked about the crisis center. Those two projects were too big to tackle together.
Okay.
Our discussion was, let's do the first project, get these services moving forward, and then we can talk about all those additional addiction services that we don't have. So again, the detail on that project,
Okay.
I don't have at this point.
So we can't, that building itself can't even be built out to the third floor, but yet we're looking at county dollars potentially going to build a second building on the site. Is that, am I understanding that?
That other project, I said crisis center because once that project's done, this is a separate project, though. It's not, it's a separate project that would provide services that would complement the crisis center. So the two complement each other to provide all services. So it would be like a campus that we have.
Another campus?
for-
Okay, I got it. All right. I'm gonna move on to, I just want to be clear that
Sure.
these dollars, the almost 44 are not, we are not totally locked in. In
These are-
terms of Metro Psych ED, that closed December 31st, correct? Are you aware of that? that the Psych ED at Severance closed?
I was aware their Psych ED closed. I did not know when. I was aware of
Okay,
it.
so I had a constituent call me that needs a Psych ED, and I had to tell them, unfortunately, that because of how the dollars went, that Metro had to close. Where are people supposed to go now to get the services that they need until this crisis center is built and ready to go?
So to the councilwoman, I would say, because of this other center, you know, that project was independent. There is absolutely a need in this county for the services that Metro had on the east side and the services of this crisis center. You know, there's a large need for beds and for these services in the county. So it's unfortunate that that had to close, but you know, these two projects have been intertwined, and it's really unfortunate. I'd love to
No,
figure
I
out.
asked you, where are people supposed to go?
So people, as Metro had explained, when they were here last time, people can go to the ERs. So Metro has a campus that has different ERs all throughout the county. They can go to their ERs to receive those services. I think rather than just a dedicated services on the east side, now they can go to any of their campuses to receive crisis services.
Okay. Lastly, just to follow up with Councilman Gallagher's question about one-time dollars, that was what we heard the money needs to go for instead of ongoing services. But for example, the jail contract, which I think is very effective, is not a one-time dollar. That's an ongoing contract. So it's not true that these dollars are used only for one-time projects.
Sure, Councilman. Good question. For clarification, I have said since the first time we discussed funding the crisis center operations that this first contract would be for 3 years of funding. However, after that, there's not additional money to come back to the well for. That's the money that we have to help support this project. There's other people that support the project, there's grants, but this is one-time opioid fund because there's not other opioid funding, as you can all see, that's available there. So I think maybe those words might have been construed different ways, but that was the reason for that statement and always has been.
Well, we were looking to fund juvenile probation officers and kept being told that we couldn't do that because it wasn't a one-time allocation. So what we see before us, and I'm not arguing with you or putting you on the spot, but just for everybody's edification, it's clear that these dollars have been used for things other than one-time projects.
So, yeah, I would say absolutely. And
Right.
the one time was something we said because the money was running out. For staffing, as I mentioned before, those were one time, again, multiple years, but one time because we didn't want to have a ton of staff on this dollars because there would be an ultimate endpoint where these dollars run out. So it was basic planning for it. I would just add, you know, this, the opioid, making sure that there's a tie to opioid remediation, mitigation needs. You know, these dollars were meant for that purpose to be used.
Okay. I want to say this jail contract with Metro is very important, and we better not start planning these other buildings and projects somewhere else, again, not looking at our core needs. And it seems like we keep doing that, is taking money and dispersing it, when right now we have an effective program like we had at Metro, I would argue, at Severance. But this jail contract to service our guests in the jail with Metro services for drug addiction and alcohol it's so vital that we better continue that. And I would submit to the body that we better look at these dollars to at least fund that before we start putting it into these other projects.
Councilman, I couldn't agree more that, you know, if I would have had, you know, $10 million here and said I'd like to save these for sustainment for Metro, they might have had even more discussions about money available for other projects. But that project for Metro is very important to sustain. And you know, I'd love to put those dollars so that they stay there for that.
Councilman Hauser, followed by Schlocker.
I will be quick. Director Kearney, I admire the work your office has done over the years. I'm a little concerned with the presentation. Just We know now that cocaine is the leading cause of overdose in Coward County, yet we already have money allocated to different projects. And so I just was wondering, what is your office doing with the landscape shifting to make the correct modifications?
It's a really excellent question, Councilman. You know, I used opioids for throughout this presentation, but all of the work that we're doing is addiction, is so for addiction needs. The stats in there for the opioid pod, we say, but those are for addiction needs. You know, excuse me, alcohol is a significant, benzos are very significant. It's a very dangerous withdrawal that they go through. So it's for all addictions, because we all know that they're going to continue to change. Something's going to come up and things change. But overall, there's unfortunately addiction is in our community and here and has been. So, so understood.
And then lastly, Director Carney, for these future projects, clarify if I misheard you wrong. You said you did get community input on the future projects, the $22 million. That's
So the future projects that we have, depending on, I know that there's been a lot of talk, I haven't been part of them specifically, but for the BCC at the jail, but that, you know, has a lot of input. It's my understanding from others. I can't speak to exactly. The other two is a discussion that I've had at our diversion board meeting. There's board members there that are all very invested in addiction and support needs. I've had it with some community providers, I haven't had like community meetings, so to speak, but it's been something that we have discussed based on the need that's out there.
Have you talked to council about any of these future projects?
These three, no, that's why they're separated. Again, separated, but with the hope that, you know, money doesn't get swiped away for other needs and then we don't have any of them there. But no, that's, I have not.
Yeah,
I'm
so-
happy to, though. I'd be happy to.
Just to Councilman Sweeney's point, please include us in the future, because what happens, Director Carney, is we get a phone call the night before to vote for something that we were not fully aware of. And so as in a true partnership moving forward, we hear stuff on the ground just like you do. So if we can work with you to make sure that these are allocated correctly, that'd be great.
I really appreciate that, and we'll do that, so thank you. And now that I'm thinking about this, I actually about a year ago did speak with some council members about that first item, and as well as others, but I would be happy to, and we'll make sure I do that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilman Schlepper.
Good afternoon. Through the chair, I just had a couple questions. I guess I got two kind of categories here. On slide 7, you were talking about some of the accomplishments that have happened. So $28 million had been committed to some of those programs. And I saw the one there, the K through 12 school-based prevention programming through the Family and Children First Council. Could you just give me a couple examples, number one, of their programming that's happening for K through 12 students, and then second, whether or not the Family and Children First Council partners with school districts, what those partnerships look like?
Sure.
Question.
Councilman, so those were projects that were done in 21 and 22, so some of it is based on recollection. They did put out an RFP for those projects. School districts did respond. I think it was Parma School District that responded at the time. It was also when COVID hit, so there was a significant delay because, as you know, teachers were trying to figure out how they're going to teach at home, and they were ready to move forward with the contract. But it was integrating opioid and addiction planning into the lesson plan for the kids. It was done with the school district. They did go out to find, I think there was another school district that's escaping me, but I'm happy to follow up with the information.
That'd be great. And then when you talk about prevention programming, these are happening in classrooms, in schools, or was this more with teachers and professionals in the building?
Sure, Councilman. So that particular program, when they did it, it was after-school program, but they also had materials. If I remember correctly, they had materials that teachers were able to provide in the classroom. Again, this is COVID time, so there was limited time and face time that they could do. But I know that there was a lot of work to get them to be able to speak directly to the kids about the programming rather than, I know they didn't just hand off, here's the documentation for somebody.
Great, thank you. And then the second question that I had, again, with the Opioid Innovation Fund and my predecessor's work here. So I know that the Cleveland Foundation holds $5 million of that for treatment and prevention innovation. So remind me again, when did the Cleveland Foundation become that partner? And then can you give me some examples of their identified priorities that the 9 members of that board that you've worked with have kind of identified?
Absolutely. So the Opioid Innovation Fund was set up by us. We had here, and it started off with Councilman Schron at the time, had said, okay, all the different tenets of, opioids, the harm reduction, the recovery, the response, we're putting money towards and we're funding. How about we think outside of the box on how to tackle this issue for innovation? So at that time, there was $5 million that this board approved. The Cleveland Foundation set it up. They operate as kind of the, I would say, administrative work. We have a board that we put together, a lot of great people on the board, people, the CEO of Stella Maris, the doctor from Metro that's very engaged with opioid planning, lots of different people with past experience, et cetera, people from a community organization. On that board, we meet. We took a long time, the CEO of Signature Health, is it Signature? Jonathan. So we took a long time because there was such a different, everyone had opioids or addiction in their life somehow, but it was very different. We wanted to kind of level set everyone's understanding. So we took the first year and a half, I think, or year for an education, really to learn about the business end, about, a lot of fundraising efforts, et cetera, and then opioids and addiction on the other. We just got to the point as a board where now we're looking to we'll issue out an RFP and look for truly innovative projects from anybody on how they might tackle addiction. It could be something like an app. It could be something like a product or equipment. It could be something like how the planning or the process is done. So we're looking for individuals to come back to us with those answers. But that RFP has not went out. That's been something that has been discussed at our board level, but we're still working through.
So again, through the chair as a follow-up, so these identified priorities, they just kind of roll out as that particular board deems them appropriate to the community. I'm just trying to get an idea of those dollars are sitting there, they're sitting in a trust, how it's allocated, who kind of makes the final call. Have you seen success with those dollars? My guess is my predecessor would want me to ask these questions. So I'm just kind of curious how successful holding those dollars in that trust has been to really kind of solve the problem up to this point.
It's a really great question because your predecessor sits on the board and has had those very questions. We operate with the 9 committee members. We have always intended and continue to be the ones who make the final decision on what we're going to fund. We had talked about finding somebody who's able to comb through, someone in the space that's able to comb through a lot of these applications from people. And so recently, one of the discussions we're making sure, and I think the name Jumpstart came out at one time in this committee and was talked about. I think our most recent meeting was moving forward, making sure we as a board have the final decision and are still engaged in that entire process. I don't want to just check something off. I want to make sure it's something that people can use in this community that's going to be helpful for this community and addiction needs. So the majority of that money has not been spent. It's still sitting there, if that answered your question. Thank you.
So, Director, regarding the follow-up on Councilman Sweeney's line about the restrictions on these funds, it's my recollection that with the initial allocation of funds, that there wasn't an absolute formal restriction, but there was some discussion with the judge in the case, and there was a general understanding that this money would be used in the opiate field. Am I correct about that?
Council President, you are correct, and there's actually language, it's soft, but language that speaks to that within our signed agreement, the final agreement that the judge signed off on. And again, he had a couple other requirements. One was that we give some money directly to someone for a program that we do centering for moms with opioids. But again, he wanted to make sure the intention of these dollars was to be used for the reason it was litigated, or almost litigated.
Do we have any opportunities to get these One Ohio dollars to be used for things that otherwise would have been funded through our opiate fund?
To the council president, so as I briefly mentioned before, the One Ohio dollars are structured a little differently. Even though they're considered Cuyahoga County dollars, the foundation dictates for the whole state, you know, how much of the money that you're able to award projects to, the timing on awarding those projects. So right now they've said, okay, the next 2 million or 1.9 million you can award projects to. And then all the projects that we as a board identify, they're sent to the foundation to then they make sure they do a final approval. It's usually just to make sure it fits in the applications, but they're trying to coordinate at the state level with all of these different regionals, which includes Cuyahoga County. So there's less opportunity there, although there are dollars that we can use for priorities.
So I understand that process. My question is whether we're able to make that work to fund some things that would otherwise be things that we would have funded from our opiate fund, or does this fund things that are totally different?
They are, I apologize. So people for these projects would be the same projects that we're funding. These are all opioids. So the application process could absolutely go to the One Ohio as an application for something if it meets the other financial, you know, requirements under 1.9, et cetera.
The Frontline Call-In Center, is that going to continue to operate after we move from the diversion center to the crisis center? And if so, how will it be funded?
Sure. No, Council President, that will not continue at the crisis. Excuse me, the crisis center. Yes.
So, as I recall, the purpose of that Frontline Center was that that police officers could call that line and get help in doing diversions. Is that correct?
Correct, Council President. It was to make sure police can call in immediately when they put somebody in their car, tell the diversion center, or tell the front line, okay, here's what I have, here's the type of patient, and then the call center could say, okay, take them to diversion, we'll get you right in, or no, they're too acute, take them to the hospital. Instead, so it could help, you know, evaluate their symptoms so that a cop wasn't showing up at diversion to be turned away to go to the hospital saying, you know, we can't take that patient, they're too acute, and then the officer doesn't come back again because.
So are we no longer going to have that program?
So one of the things that has continuously, not continuously, but we heard, is by the time the police officers, or anybody for that matter, go through that line of questioning, they're often at the diversion center because of proximity. So that was another thing after evaluation, lots of discussion with the board and others, that they felt it wasn't necessary. Also because, and this is key, the crisis center has said, you know, we are an open door, we'll take anyone. So if someone comes and they're not in the right place, the crisis center will get them to the right place of what it might be.
The crisis mapping program, is that a pending program or a completed program, and what's the dollar amount on that?
The crisis mapping program is the crisis mapping program dollar amount is approximately, if I remember correctly, it's around $200,000, a little bit more. And it's currently in process. They are supposed to submit their final report in the coming months. It has started, but it's not completed. And you know what, Council President, I apologize. Let me confirm that if that's okay, and I'll get right back to you. But it's close to there, but I do want to make sure of that.
Okay. And the program for the behavioral health care center at the jail, is that money for operations or for capital?
For at the end of the presentation,
The last of the future projects?
yeah, I think, Council President, that may be for capital, but I can't speak to that exactly. I can find out for you.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much. That was very helpful. I think that it's a first step in our having the knowledge base we need to participate more effectively in this process. So we're appreciative.
Thank you very much, Council President. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
You guys better be glad I didn't go through all those slides.
All meetings of the Cuyahoga County Council are open to the public under the Ohio Open Meetings laws. Under that law, council may go into executive session during a meeting for specifically authorized purposes. During executive session, council confers outside the hearing of the public. Council may not make any decisions about any matters in executive session. All decisions are made in public. This afternoon, the council will go into executive session for the purpose of discussing a collective bargaining matter. During this time, our live stream will be down, and we ask all those not specifically needed for the executive session to remain in council chambers. Council members will convene in the adjacent Committee Room A and will re-enter the meeting once the executive session has ended. Is there a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing a collective bargaining matter?
So moved?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded, and I would ask the clerk to please call the roll on the motion.
Ms. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Hauser? Ms. Simon? Ms. Simon is away. Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Castleberry?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Schlepper?
Yes.
Ms. Conwell is absent. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Council President Miller?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you very much, and we will now move to Committee Room A for the executive session. The executive session has been completed. We are back in the committee of the whole. Does anyone have any miscellaneous business? Hearing none, the committee of the whole is adjourned, and we will begin the regular council meeting at 5 o'clock.